A good meeting.
Okay, so I'm going to call to order the January 4th Finance and Audit Committee meeting and read the statement of announcement. A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the January 4th, 2021 Finance and Audit Committee meeting was distributed on December 31st, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance. Can I get a motion to... Barry, can you mute your phone?
He's hung up.
He's good.
Okay, Barry, are you on the computer? Yeah, I think you are. I think.
See, Barry.
Okay.
I think I'm here. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you hear us?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, the agenda is approved as written. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from December 7th, 2020 Finance and Audit Committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Minutes are approved as written, no changes. All right. So the first item on the agenda for Chris is the Band Bs and Is implementation. Chris.
All right, thank you. This is just a standing topic that we will keep on the agenda for the foreseeable future, just until we are sure that the switch to fee-for-service has been fully completed. At this point, I just want to give you a brief update. You know, at the holidays and everything, we haven't made a ton of additional advancements since the last commission meeting where I updated everyone, but I will tell you what we're working on right now and hope to have movement on this week and next as we're continuing to work on the contract language. They'll need to be updated for each of our provider contracts. We also are going to be scheduling a training in this month for providers because there's a good bit of logistical type things that they need to know how to do as far as what to submit to get paid and so forth, the type of review of activity we expect them to maintain and things of that nature. And we also need to work on the directive. I think it's 250.10 or 250.01. I can't remember what the number of it is, but it's funding for services. And that directive also needs to get reviewed into you guys ASAP. So those are the main things I was going to share. I know Mary is working still on reviewing what's coming thus far.
We've got 37 requests for band swaps from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 agencies. And I've got 2 requests at the end of December. But with the holidays and also we've seen an uptick in the COVID cases out there. And one of the counties, I really don't want to take their swaps right now till their executive director is back from being ill so they can review it and sign off on them. But so we're probably another week or so into looking at these. Hopefully we can have a more substantial report as to how many we've swapped and how many we turned back. But that's all we have so far. So
Yes, there's not a bunch of update at this, but for the commission meeting, we will certainly have a good bit of additional progress made between now and then, because that's still a couple weeks out, almost 3 weeks out.
So
Right?
this is cost neutral at this because it's just swapping bands. But the second phase, I'll probably tell you we're putting that off a little bit and giving them more time because that's going to have substantial documentation to be turned in. And I can see by some of the stuff that's already sent in that we might want to make sure they get a good primer on. So we only have one go around at it, not sending back and forth and asking for more information. Because a lot of folks sent in the wrong stuff. They sent in their band requests for increases from G's to H's, but no swaps. So I had a few of those to take a little peek at. So they'll need to have some work done on those.
And the other thing I failed to mention is the loan program. We need I need to get with our legal department, Constance, and discuss with her the proper process to follow in regards to developing a promissory note and whether any kind of recorded lien would be advisable, or what type of language we need to put in it to make the loan as enforceable as possible. I know we're the payor, so it's easy for us to get our money back if we wanted to. We just take it out of their check, but of course that's not how we would want to do business. So we want to make sure we have as arm's length agreement as possible with these providers. And again, the loan program, it's kind of like, it couldn't be like a payday loan problem where if you borrow money for the future, but you don't fix your family's finances, you're in a never-ending cycle of needing to borrow money. So we really need to ensure that that's not what this loan program is. So a portion of that needs to be validation that they're doing things to correct their budget. So that this isn't an ongoing need for them to meet their cash flow needs. So that's another big thing working on.
All right, does anyone have any questions for them, for now? If not, then we will move on to item number 6 on the agenda, audit directives, revisions, collaboration.
Okay, Kevin and I haven't had it, thank you, I'm sorry, got ahead of you. Kevin and I haven't had a chance to actually meet to go over kind of the results of the audits that we're getting in and whether there's anything new that we need to do in regards to the quality issues that may continue to exist. But we have been emailing and discussing, having a meeting like that to go over any new or ideas that maybe we weren't aware of last year when we did last year's revisions. But keep in mind, every year the audit directive is reissued. It's usually done in the March-April timeframe, right, Kevin? And so we do have a list of items that we intentionally did not put in this past fiscal year's directives because we didn't want to overload the provider auditors with changes. So we did have a phase 2 list, which I'm in the process of going back through our initial list and identifying those items. And then, like I stated, we'll get with Kevin and our cost analysis team and determine if there's anything new we need to add to this list. And then, Kevin, I'm assuming we will present to the commission, to this committee, probably in March, right? At the March meeting, so that we can adopt it and implement it in April. I mean, so the commission would adopt it in March.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the timeline. We need to get it to this committee, and then it needs to go to the commission, and then I'm assuming it needs a 10-day public comment. So yeah, we need to be, I think, shooting for getting it to the commission in March.
Right.
To give us the timeline to get it issued. That give us time to do whatever we need to do and get it out there, because a lot of them start their preliminary like in May.
Right.
So yeah, that ought to give us enough time.
And there's a lot to consider there as we move fee for service. I can see a variety of audit reporting as well as agreed upon procedures, engagement level procedures that we might want to implement or reporting requirements. Plus there may be other modifications where we can reduce things as well as a result of fee for service. But the main issue I know that we're going to have a lot of discussion and consideration of is this concept of mandatory auditor rotation. This is something that DDSN has wanted to do for many years, and I can let Kevin speak to that unless I'm misunderstanding. That is something that that's been considered for a long, long time, and I know Barry brought it up as well last year when we were doing this past year's directive review. And so this is just one of those slippery slope areas that we really need to make sure we do properly. But that, I think, is going to be the most contentious discussion we're going to have as a committee and as for public comment even. So what you're talking about, to put that in layman's terms, we may have a board out there that we have many that fit this actually, that have had the same auditor 20, 25, 30, 35 years. Some, I know of one board that's had the same exact auditor since inception. Now, the firm name got changed a couple times in there, but it's the same firm. So the issue is, the premise behind mandatory auditor rotation is that you don't want the auditor and the client getting too close to one another, getting comfortable with each other, and basically the auditor taking things for granted and not really doing their due diligence to look at things because they're like, we looked at that 6 years ago. We don't need to look at this every year. Right. And so the idea is to get a fresh set of eyes and to get folks, kind of not to just take the audit for granted, if you will, because under the state procurement code, which is what we follow and what we pass on to our providers, it's an exception whether you bid out your auditor or not. You don't even have to bid your audit out. It's not required. Kevin has suggested over the years, and I agree, that it's prudent, and it should be bid out periodically.
We recommend it just because you're using public funds.
I don't know if y'all can hear.
Not.
Go ahead, Kevin.
We recommend it because we're using public funds. So to make sure, as public funds, that they're being utilized and you're getting the best price. I will give another example to the what Chris was saying in terms of the comfort level. We had, it's been several years ago, but we had a finance director who was basically doing online payroll deductions to herself, making online personnel, cutting herself checks. And you think, well, why didn't and it had been going on for years, well, why didn't the auditor catch it? Well, the auditor came in, and when they sampled, they picked the same 2 months every year to sample. So guess what 2 months she did not do any kind of withdrawals from, those 2 months.
And when the new auditor caught it, they had a replacement auditor that came in,
Right.
And they caught it, right?
Yep, and it was a mess.
So anyways, there's a lot of pros and cons to mandatory auditor rotation. I think we also have an inherent built-in problem that we just don't have a whole lot of auditors that know our industry. So that kind of scares me and gives me a little bit of pause. If we have, let's say 5 to 10 audit firms, if we start forcing auditor rotation on a periodic basis, what's that look like? And there may be audit firms that aren't interested in expanding their audit practices. They're like, I don't really care to get any more work in this field. So we got to be careful what we wish for. There's also a good bit of negative to auditor rotation, and I forwarded to the committee earlier today because I knew we weren't going to actually discuss it today. But I sent you the GAO, the Government Accountability Office's study on mandatory auditor rotation. It's like 170 pages long. And then the PCAOB, also the Public Companies Accounting Oversight Board. They do all the public companies, SEC registrants and stuff, audit oversight. And so I sent you some information from the PCAOB as well. And so I think that's going to be the biggest issue that we're going to have before us. And what frequency are we going to use? I'm just trying to get your juices going a little bit. Are we going to say, if you've had the same auditor for at least 10 years, you can't hire them for another without, term limit, if you will. Or is it 15 years, or is it 5 years? What's the number? So.
Did we do some type of survey last year when we talked about this to get some feedback, or you had some one-on-one conversations with some auditors to talk about it? I thought we got some public input on this, or sure,
Not on
or
this
maybe
one.
provider input.
No,
Felt like there was some pushback already about
it's probably,
people being
well,
nervous about not being able to, not having someone that will step up and do their books, you know, or whatever. Maybe I'm thinking something else.
there were some comments that came back. This past year's audit directive, some of the comments we got back were, you know, you guys there's so much you guys require of us that we don't even know if we're gonna continue doing this work anymore.
The auditors.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the only thing I can parallel that to is I used to do school district work and you work for universities. And those audits are far more involved and complicated than anything we require. So to me, it was not really legitimate comments or complaints. You build it into your audit fees, and I know that's a concern because providers, you know, if audit fees are going to go up, providers are going to be like, wait a minute, you just caused our audit fee to go up 20%, but yet you haven't given me any additional funding for it. So that's a potential valid problem that we need to consider. But no, I think what you're going to hear, if we put this out for public comment, is that, look, we've been working with the same auditor for all these years. They have their own way of ensuring that they keep a fresh set of eyes on our books by rotating staff on the audit, and what months we select, and there's all these other things you can do that an auditor can do to ensure to their client that they are, you're basically simulating being a fresh auditor internal to your own firm. And so I think we're going to get some of that feedback that we have to figure out how we're going to manage it.
So when you were saying that some of them were saying it's too complex, the things it requires, could we make it less complex than what we require so that we can implement what we want from a reputation standpoint, or is it just too
Personally,
much to risk if I don't know, we're losing too much in terms of the complexity it's giving us, which is what we need, which is why you asked for it, right?
well, personally, and I'll let Kevin comment on this as well from his perspective, because he's been here a lot longer than I have. I don't feel like it's that what we expect for auditors is overburdensome or too much or overly complex. Our funding system, our directives, our regulations, the whole capitated funding system, the paybacks, the settlements, all this stuff, that's what makes us complicated. It's not the report. If you look at an audit, you got what GASB requires or FASB requires. It's add stuff in there that we need to do cost reporting on. So really, that's consistent across all audits, no matter which type of entity you're auditing. So I just think the agreed upon procedures area, I think that is one that I would tend to agree with them on. All those extra requirements like related to room and board, cost allocation plans, Medicaid billing, consumer funds, minimum salary testing, all these things. And the only way we can reduce that is if we're willing to say we don't need them to look at that for us anymore.
Right. Well, the issue is that those are controlled. Everything Chris just listed, that's our internal control to make sure that they're compliant. And if I told you, well, we never have any issues in that, but when we review the reports, when we get them, we have issues. We have people that aren't paying for whatever reason. It just got overlooked, but we always have they find a few direct care staff that weren't getting the minimum salary. So, we have exceptions. We don't just get those reports and they're all clean. So if they're not doing it, we need to find some way that we're checking for that.
So you're coming up with some.
The point is, we need to, y'all are putting the cart before the horse whenever you say, well, we may not be able to find people to do the auditing, to do the auditing and all that stuff. If we can't find it down the road, Then we worry about maybe stopping audit rotation a year, 5 years from now if we can't find enough people. But let's don't assume we can't find enough people before we ever start audit rotation. I can give y'all stories as to why audit rotation is important, and I'm not gonna sit here all day. But I tell you, that's one of the things I learned from my years of being on a county board is how important that was. And I do not want to explain in public why I was unable to get our place to change. But it is, to me, a very important issue that needs to be addressed. That's the only thing I want to say about it right now.
I think I agree with you on everything you said. The point I'm making is anytime you're making a decision, you think about the pros and cons associated with any decision and the risks. And if you're not forward thinking and thinking of what could happen or what may be an issue, then we end up making bad policy decisions. So I'm not saying that we're going to run into that issue. I think with a phased in approach, one approach we may take is, okay, if you've had the same auditor over 25 years, you must change your auditor between now and this fiscal year. Then the following year, we can say, okay, if you've had them over 20 years, we could phase it in so that, because literally what you're talking about is probably, what would your statement be on this code? Probably 80% of our boards have probably had their auditors over 10 years. Would you say that's true?
I would say it's a very high percentage. I don't know that I'd put a specific number, but they just don't change that.
So you're talking about potentially 30 boards changing auditors in 1 year.
Right.
And let's say, you get 30 RFPs, your firm has to, you can't, if you win all 30 audits, you're in trouble.
That's the other thing.
And
Yeah.
so if I was the audit firm, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just bid on these 7. Well, what if I get all 7?
Right.
Now I'm in trouble. So, we need to think about
Logistics.
unintended consequences.
Right. There is some potential logistical issues set up. Now, that being said, like I know just off the top of my head, we got a couple of new firms that did agreed upon procedures this year. So, you do have new firms coming into the market. But
All right. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a fun topic to deal with. All right. Anyone have any questions or comments before we move to the next item? All right. So item number 7, cost reports update.
All right, again, this is kind of like the B&I, we'll just keep it on here as a standing agenda item until we get the commission, the committee to a comfort level with where we are on cost reports. We are internally working with our CPA firm still in the 3 years they're working on. Of course, with holidays, we haven't really gotten very far with them. They canceled all of our weekly meetings, the last 2 or 3 that we had because they were off and had conflicts on their side, but I think we have a meeting Monday, get going back again on those years. And then our Debbie staff and cost analysis are working really hard on 2018 and 19. 2020 cost reports and all are just now finally coming in. But because of our own staff shortages we've had all kinds of crazy stuff going on in cost analysis as far as staff things they're dealing with themselves and different types of health issues and so forth. We had an intern that helps us a lot with this, and he was off as well because he's out of school. So we kind of had a dead period, if you will, but we're getting ready to ramp that back up strongly now that we're back from the new year. And Pat has asked, this is something that just came up today, in fact, with our call with HHS. We're going to probably shift gears and really focus hard on 2020. So we can get the most current cost report data filed so that we really know what our costs are. So when we go through this market rate study and we got this budget ask to address rate issues, we're not telling them to look at 17 or look at 18. They're going to have 20. So we're going to shift gears. I'll meet with Debbie and her staff And we'll start focusing on 2020, and he had commented on trying to get that done maybe by June so that we can have that behind us. Problems, we're gonna have all these, we have 16 and 17 filed, then we're gonna have 20 filed, then we're gonna have, we just gotta keep up with the pieces because there's gonna be gaps.
2018, 2019.
And we'd already started on those, but there's a lot of background work that goes into these. So we would just, the team just said, okay, let's mark your spot so we know where you left off. But let's start on 2020. You want to comment on that at all, Pat?
No, it's just something that we need to think about prioritizing because current costs are going to be relevant in getting new rates.
All right, so anyone, any questions for us? For the next item on the agenda? All right, so item number 8, personal funds directed at the resident level.
Okay. All the members should have a marked up version as well as a version that would represent the final if approved. I didn't send out the other one until this morning. Those here in person, you should have both in your packets. Barry and Stephanie, I don't know if you're on top of your email, but I did send out the non-marked up versions if you want to look at those as well. Basically, this directive was referred to us from the policy committee. And so what we'll do is review these, and then if acceptable, take them back. Barry, correct me if I'm wrong when I say this, but we'll take these back directly to the commission without going back through policy again. That's correct.
That's right. That's correct. It'll go straight to the commission from here.
Okay. And so if you look at 200
deferred.
Sir?
I said, because this has been deferred to y'all, to this committee. So, and I only have one thing to say about it, but go ahead.
Okay. The main thing we were trying to address in this directive, well, first of all, it needed a lot of clarification and cleanup as to organization and just a good bit of, just housekeeping, if you will. The main issue I had with this directive, in its old state, being an auditor and being familiar with residential programs, basically the way the directive was written, if a consumer had money on their person, whether it be in their wallet, dresser drawer, under their mattress, in their pocket, the way the directive was written, basically had to invade their privacy and go look through all their stuff and find all their cash. Because the definition of cash on hand was not only cash on hand directive. So what happens is, if a consumer needs assistance with managing cash, what will happen is they'll have this little petty cash fund, if you will, and they put funds in it, and then they distribute money out of it for allowance pretty much every week, or they can pay other little small amounts out of it for convenience purposes. Kevin, I guess a lot of it may be if they want to go eat at Ryan's. And
They go out to eat, they go to the flea market, they go to the movies, any kind of small outing, they may go to the dollar store and get some personal needs items.
so we have two pieces to cash on hand. We have the money that the staff is holding on to. They got a lockbox, so I've got $100 of Johnny's money, and I haven't yet distributed it yet, and I'm holding it until such time we disperse it as allowance or for an outing or what have you. The problem is we have all the regulations over that, which are solid. The issue is once I give Johnny $20 of allowance, unless he only spends 8 of it this week, then I give him his allowance next week and he only spends 10 of it. I'm basically in a position with this directive that I have to go violate their privacy to find all this extra cash that they may have. And so this doesn't eliminate the expectation that you're aware of what money they may have, but you're not required to go search through all their drawers and do their wallet and things of that nature. That was the main substantive change to this. Kevin, you looked like you had something you wanted to say about it.
Nope, I'm good.
So, the petty cash piece of this, if you will, it has to be secure. There's a ledger that they have to maintain. It has to be balanced periodically. It has all the disbursement side of it that aren't allowance have to have receipts that properly justify and support the transactions. And if something's suspicious, they're required to report it. And so all that's in there. And then as far as the personal cash that's not securely maintained, we just kind of released some of the requirements there so that that's not expected. We're looking at final rule. All of our programmatic folks, myself, internal audit all agreed that was kind of something we needed to address from a privacy perspective. So Barry, what you said you noted something?
Barry?
I'm sorry, it's not on this one. It's the other thing we're talking about. I'm sorry. It's not on the cash one. Go ahead. I don't really have any questions about this cash thing.
Okay, will Darren still sign this one? I see this, his name is on page 4 of the right.
I guess not. I don't know. Pat, Mary, Susan, maybe need to ask who.
Yeah.
If it comes through committee, should Robin sign as chair of the committee instead of?
He's the
I mean,
vice
it's
chair.
still the commission.
It's still the commission.
The commission.
It's the commission policy, so it's still the
It's the commission.
All right.
That's good. All right, anybody else have any, questions or thoughts on this? Was this put out for public?
It will be.
Will be, if y'all approve it
Okay,
today, it'll go to the commission, and if the commission approves it at that point, then it goes out for comment, right?
No.
I think we
No,
put out.
it's gonna
It goes out.
From here,
No.
okay, and
And
then
then
to the
we'll
commission.
have the comments back by the commission meeting to know if there's any additional.
anything
revisions.
substantive changes that need to be made or need to go back to the committee. No, I think that, the idea that you have to have a good financial plan, that's what's really in here, that you can't have more money in that account than what your financial plan says you can have. And also the financial plan says whether you can hold on to your change or not. I mean, it says you can be responsible for that or you can, but Chris is right. You can't go look at in everybody's everything to find a couple of quarters here and there. Because we're not talking large amounts of money. You mitigate the risk just by the amount limit that you can have in there to start with. Correct?
Right, that's the control, and that's why it caps it out at $50.
$50.
Right, now, I will say, I just sort of scanned that one this afternoon when I got it. It was in there, and I'm assuming it still is in there, that, if there was a need for somebody to have more, because when we do our training, it is tough to write one directive for the folks that we serve, from ICF level to SLP1 level. So if you had somebody who needed that, say an SLP1 consumer who is competitively employed 40 hours a week, eat lunch out every day, they probably need more than that. And it just needs to be supported programmatically and documented in that financial plan.
That is in there, as well as when I was out in the provider world, one of the things you told me is, Chris, the $50 is not a default number. It should still be justified. You can't just say everybody $50.
Right,
That's a ceiling, not a floor.
right. And some providers,
So you had an issue with that. So we addressed that in here as well, that $50, it's a ceiling, not something you should just default to
right.
for everybody.
And some providers do, simply because they don't want that level of cash in a home. They may have a $30 limit instead of $50, which they can choose to be more restrictive.
So again, it's based on assessment and the
Right.
individual's needs, because again, gotta be person-centered. So having a good financial plan is
All right, well, then, if no one else has any other questions, can I get a motion to approve this directive to be, go out?
I just have one question before we move on. Are there any concerns other than what's here? I'm talking to staff, in your opinion?
Than what we discussed
I
today?
mean, I think, you know, our goal is as we move through these directives to start rolling up some of these individual directives into a big one-stop shop type management of personal funds. So if I'm a staff member, I don't need to know these 6 different directives that I have to go find to know what I have to comply with. It's in one. The problem is the MACDAD is 212 DD. It takes a lot of revision. And so to hold this up, to wait till 212 is done, didn't make a lot of sense. So we've got the cash figured out. Once we get to 212 DD, we'd like to roll this into that directive and eliminate this one. So that's my only main continuing existing concern, I guess, if you will, in regards to this directive, is that I don't think we really need a directive
right.
on cash on hand.
It's going to be part of the larger directive because it's the individual's cash, so it's personal funds. But we're, you know, as we move through this directive review and part of Barry's committees, we're revising, we know we're revising policies that down the road, when we get systems changed in place, that would be rolled up into those systems and the policies would go by the board. Because we think that some of the problems with reporting is that, oh Lord, you don't know which one you're following because they sit on top of one another. So that's where we're getting to. And it's like, yeah, we have to do this preliminary work, but we know, well, actually, this will help when you do the other one. Because that other policy hasn't been revised in some time. So it really does need to be looked at.
Madam Chair, I have no other concerns.
All right, so, can I get a motion to approve 200-01-DD?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The directive is approved. Next item on the agenda, 2009-DD, fees for residential services and ICF and IID facilities.
Right, so this particular directive is very unique in that intermediate care facilities are so different than any other residential program that we operate in a lot of different ways, not only in the service side, but also in the finances and how what's included in the rate, what's not included in the rate, whether you have room and board or not. There's just a ton of different nuances. So this particular directive relates to just these ICF, IID facilities. And what it goes over basically is how we go about billing Medicaid and determining who should pay for the placement there and how we handle folks if they're not Medicaid eligible. There are a good bit, if you look at the marked up version, if you look at items C and D, E, F, and G, actually, all 4 or 5 of those sections, that's all been pulled in straight out of HHS's contract. We have an ICF contract with Health and Human Services. There are contractual requirements within our contract with them that we didn't do a good job of pushing out to the providers. And so we've incorporated that big chunk of blue, that starts on page 3 or 2, and goes through page 3. Those are all just straight out of the contract. And so trying to really capture items contractually obligated to, is one reason, this directive has so many revisions. And then also, trying to clarify what we found is there were a lot of things that were in this directive that says we were doing that we weren't doing. You know, different things internal audit was gonna do, or the facility administrator was gonna do, or the finance department was gonna do. So we looked at our current practices and then reviewed whether our current practices were proper. So did we wanna change what we were currently doing to what the directive stated, or change the directive to what we were doing, or something in between? And so a lot of the changes here, we're clarifying that as well, because we just had weird terms and weird quotes being referenced here. So a lot of revisions are to that regard. And then on page 5 of the markup version of the personal needs allowance, it helps me to have this built into our directive. Again, this is from the Health and Human Services Medicaid manual. And what it does is it clarifies how personal needs allowance works. Basically, if you're in an ICF, you get $30 or $100 of your income a month. Always 30 or always 100, one or the other. And so our directive really didn't explain how that's determined. And so I think that helps to have this defined in here. And then, again, just a lot of fixing just terminology and how the document flowed was a big part of this. And, I think that's pretty much the substantive changes of this directive.
This will also go out for public.
This really does, if I'm a provider, looking at this doesn't change anything I'm expected to do. It's just, the other directive does. It allows them, there are some savings, if you will, and some relaxation of requirements on the other directive, but with this one, it's more just getting everything into a solid policy about ICFs. And really the comments would be, really shouldn't be anything about, the impact it has on them and the cost and the training and things of that nature.
Would they be, because they're.
No, that'd be in 212 DD, but what this does talk about is if you look at, find it. Under other matters, under item, are you looking at the markup version?
Yeah, I'm looking at markup.
It is at the top of page 5. We did reference able accounting here. The issue we have with this directive, honestly, I didn't really like how it was worded. So basically, there's Medicaid resource limits.
Yeah.
And if you get over that amount,
Yeah.
it attempted to tell you what options were available, and I didn't really think the options available were truly all the options available. So we did add in here, to look at prepaid burial contracts, to look at burial savings accounts, to look at funding of a SC ABLE account, funding of a trust account, etc. And so it really got away from just go blow the consumer's money and spend it type deal.
Right.
Go find something to spend it on.
Right, so they don't hit the 2,000.
Right.
And that's always been
I
a
know,
concern.
I know.
But that ABLE account really does give you an out on that. I mean, that is a big resource to families. It's easy to set up and it's, but they really do need to make sure they have the other things done first, like the pre-burial needs, that needs to be met. And, but then after that, after you've done that, you still, especially as more of our parents retire, their income's going up.
I think technically they changed it to say able, Palmetto able.
Okay,
If you want to be,
okay.
they, when they
Changed
first
it.
launched it was SC able, but they decided there's some
Okay.
pushback from a
We'll fix
similar
that.
nonprofit that operates under that same
Right.
thing,
Right.
that they pushed to have it changed,
Okay.
so there wasn't confusion, and so the treasurer changed.
Sure.
So just a little.
And actually, Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, you can join any able account in any state. Didn't
Most-
Anderson
most
join
of them
Virginia's or
can.
something like that?
I think there's one state that you can't. I
Right.
think, almost all, but I think there's one or two that you
Well,
have to
ours
be
is
a state
operated by
resident,
somebody
but most
else.
of them are.
Before South Carolina was so slow getting there started, we had several providers that were utilizing Virginia specifically, and then some other ones.
Ohio, I think.
It's called Palmetto Able Savings Program.
Okay.
And, yeah, I don't think we operate it. I think it is operated by another,
It is.
trying to think of what state it
I
was.
think it maybe is
Ohio, I
Ohio.
think Ohio does a lot of them.
I was gonna say, and last I heard, they were the administrator for like 14 states,
Yeah.
but they've turned it into a nice little lucrative
Yeah.
area for them.
I got on top of that.
Yeah, they got a niche market.
Okay, it's not, but just to be exactly. All right,
And then I think Barry said he had a comment on this one as
Barry,
well.
do you have a comment on this, or any questions on this directive?
Yeah, I did, but I can't find my comment right now, which is kind of embarrassing. Because I thought I'd marked it, and when I marked it didn't have it, but doesn't it say down here that if the, or does it say down here that if there is a variance in the amount that somebody is charged, that we can recoup the money from the provider? Is that in this directive?
The language I can think of in regards to that would be if they cause a loss in Medicaid eligibility, then basically the consumer would have to switch over from being Medicaid funded to being pay
Out of pocket.
pay out of pocket, right? In which case, that would impact the funding we would give them as a band. If they were private pay at that point, we would take their payment from them. In a fee-for-service world, it works itself out, but in a prospective payment system, we'd have to cut their funding.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about. Is in a fee-for-service world, would that be relevant, or would it not be? I guess it wouldn't be relevant in a fee-for-service world, because they would have either gotten the money for providing the service or not, right?
Still,
Between them and, we'll have to work through all that when we go
It's a transition issue.
to residential.
and if I understand the question, it would still be like, in other words, I have a great uncle that passes away and leaves me $250,000. I now have in excess of my Medicaid assets. So I'm gonna lose Medicaid. If I'm an ICF, what we've done in the past is I'm gonna go private pay until such time that money is depleted. And I can then again apply for Medicaid.
Okay, all right. I don't really, that's fine. I don't really have any other questions about it. That's kind of what I was getting at, but I was thinking it was addressed in here somehow, but I guess it's really not directly addressed. But I may be wrong about having read it wrong. I read a lot of stuff, so sorry.
Well, we do have contract language that I think addresses what you're after. It's not in this directive, but our contract does address that.
Okay, I thought it was in this direct. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, but as long as y'all got that covered, it's fine.
All right, any other comments or questions regarding this directive? When was the last time it was updated? That 1990?
The problem is every time we do last review, data last revision, it gets rid of what was.
Okay, so here it says July 2015, so that's probably it.
July 2015.
Okay. 7 years. Well,
A lot of revisions back in that time were simply changing the point where an
Yeah,
client to individual served, or, there's a lot of just terminology type stuff that they were doing.
Changing the name of the facility.
all right, well, then, once that edit is made on the, Palmetto, Able account, the directive will be, I guess, in a format or a version that we can approve. So can I get a motion to approve the, 209 directive with the edit that we talked about in Palmetto?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor, say aye.
Any opposed? Directive is with minor edits. All right, so the next item on our agenda, there's action.
All right, well, Debbie's in here, and I want to thank her as well as her team and some others that have been instrumental in submission of massive amounts of documentation, and that's not an understatement, is it, Debbie?
Not at all.
At some point, you begin to question, even if it's worth the effort, because you don't know if you're going to get approved for anything. So luckily, we have submitted a good bit of expenses, and at this point, we have been approved, which I've already announced. One part of this was about $525,000 for phase one. That was through June 30 expenses, and then we're in phase two right now, and we have been approved for another $552,371.65. So for a total of $1,077,955.83 has been approved and funded, with a remaining amount that's pending of $1,218,372.60 that we're still waiting on feedback on. So I want to thank our team. I'd like to take a minute and read everybody's name that was involved in this if I can. I'd like to thank Diane Welsh, Nancy Rumbaugh, Debbie Wilson, Kelly Anderson, Michael Bell, and Andrea Hodges for all their hard work on this project. And so we are also working very hard with the state. The state obviously has had to change some things so that they don't reach in and grab this money from us, because that's a real risk. So they recognize that at the state level. And there's some hoops we're jumping through right now internally down in finance. And Debbie, I don't know if you have the details on that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but there's some kind of hoops we're having to jump through. Kelly's having to work on to ensure that we don't get, these monies don't get turned around and they just take it right back from us. Because that is a risk that, okay, so you got $1 million out of CARES Act, now we want that $1 million back at the state level. And so we are working around that, and that's not their intent, is not to take the funds from us. I just want to personally acknowledge everybody's tenacity and effort made. And it's $1 million of funding that primarily pays for the hazard bonuses that we've done, ion filters, trying to remember what kind of stuff is in there.
Well, one of the biggest pieces is PP&E and overtime.
PPE and overtime. So anyways, I just want to make the committee aware of that.
Anybody have any questions before we move to the next? So item number 11 on our agenda, capital projects funded. Funded February plan projects.
So I'm just trying to set you guys up for our February meeting in advance, so that you can kind of be thinking about it and tell me what you need, yes, in advance, other than some basic information. What we need to do is start getting some of our vehicles ordered. They take a good bit of time to get in off state contract, especially some of the ADA vehicles that we need. So if you remember the capital budget you all discussed, we had to come back through you all for actual projects that we want to do.
Right.
And so we had earmarked or stated that we had about $1.5 million that we were going to try and spend during 2021 on vehicles. That number is a little high. It's probably closer to 1.2 or 1.1 we ended up needing after we start to look at the actual vehicles that we need to purchase. But I'm not going to come to you in February asking for all that, but I do want to maybe take 15 or 20 of these vehicles that we've identified and go ahead and start getting that rolling. And then what I will do February meeting and prior to is share with you exactly which vehicle is taken out of service at which regional center, its condition, which these vehicles are over 20, 30 years old with lots of miles. What we plan on doing with that vehicle, whether we're going to surplus it or let's save it as a spare, because we do need spare vehicles. Many of these are not even, can't even justify keeping them as a spare. And then what we intend to replace them with. And then we will total all that up, and then we will need to have a discussion at that point whether y'all fine with us financing through the lease program or not. I know Barry has expressed on a number of occasions that he doesn't support that, so that's another conversation that we'll need to have in February because I still recommend it. But I know we talked to, I think, Ms. Rollinson, she dropped off. She's not up there anymore. I think she said she had spoken with the governor, and then I know Mary has spoken with Senator Alexander's office. And is that right?
Yes, sir.
And so, anyway.
Chris, you're kind of fading out. I'm having a hard time hearing what you're saying about in the last 3 or 4 sentences.
Okay, we're gonna move the microphone a little closer to Chris and maybe that'll.
Sorry about that. I thought the phone up right in front of me would be adequate. So when we have that presentation in February, not only will we bring all that information on the vehicles themselves, but we need to have a conversation about utilizing our cash reserves versus taking advantage of the lease program that we've talked about before. And I was stating that I knew you weren't a big supporter of borrowing money, but that is something I continue to recommend. And I know one of your concerns was how the state folks would view that. And so I was just commenting on Ms. Rawlinson, I know, had spoken with the governor's office, and Mary had spoken with Senator Thomas Alexander's office on this. And both parties thought that was a good use of their program and that was what it was created for. So we'll have to have that conversation as well to see how you want to pay for those vehicles.
And how much money did you say those 10 to 15 vehicles would be?
15 or 20 vehicles we're wanting to do in our first phase, be about $600,000 is my estimate.
And it needs to be a rolling implementation or it ends up in the same boat.
We need to keep doing it like
So,
every
yeah,
6
it just
months.
needs to be-
Yeah. And when you're buying off state contract, it takes a long, long time to actually get them in place. So we'll be lucky to get these vehicles. If purchased in February, we issue a PO, we may not even get them by the end of June delivered. So.
They take a while to get in. You almost forget you ordered the darn thing. It takes a while to come in.
So that was really the only capital projects. The thing I would like to mention to the commission though is I have some very positive news. It's kind of ironic. We were talking about VDI in October and November, which again was our virtual desktop where we were talking about having basically, okay. In December, the state admin office sends out their newsletter and they're talking about they're implementing it's called Admin Cloud Brokerage Service gains momentum is the topic in the article, the newsletter in December. So our IT guy, Mike, followed up with them on that and come to find out the state's in the process of implementing the same system. And their pilot agency is Health and Human Services. And so Mike has been working really hard with HHS as well as the state agency folks to really make sure he understood what the state was doing. And so we had submitted back in September our IT plan with the state, indicating that we were looking at going this direction. So between our IT plan that we submitted, I think it was in August or September, we turned this in. And then them working on it, they determined that we were an ideal candidate for this project. And basically we're going, if we go this direction, you all had approved $487,000 for the first phase, the capital. That's going to be zero. And so we will actually save at least $500,000 in the next 5 years by being in one of these pilot agencies. We're going to join HHS basically and be another pilot agency, and the cost is going to be pennies on the dollar. But again, that was just, the timing was unreal, and that they were working on this thing at the same time we were. But we didn't know it.
So they're in the clouds.
And so they're using Amazon Web Services. You had questioned the security of the cloud and where this data was going to reside. They're actually going to use Amazon Web Services for their state system. They're not going to host it at DTO. Or is that right? DTO. Is that the right? ITMO? All right. So we basically found $500,000 in our budget, which is always nice to have that kind of surprise. For our vehicles.
That
That's what I was gonna say, do we need to borrow?
that is only $100,000 short of what you need for the vehicles, man.
That's right.
Yeah, but, cash is a precious commodity.
It's valuable.
All righty. So that was item 11.
Okay, great. All right, we'll move on if no one has any other questions about capital projects. The next item is the CFO report.
All right. Just a few things. Our House budget hearing is on the 19th. It's not anything that commissioners can attend. It's just limited to 3 people that are going to attend that, and I don't think it's virtual, right?
Well, it's in person right now, but with the numbers doing what they're doing, it very well could change by the 19th. You just don't know.
And so we're prepping for that. We've got some stuff due tomorrow and then some more stuff due over to the House folks next week.
We've got a 1-page summary due tomorrow, and then kind of like a booklet, presentation booklet that's due on the 12th.
One thing that we need to bounce off of you all in regards to an amendment is Health and Human Services sets rates. And of course, when they set rates, it impacts us. If it's one of the services that hit us in the state plan or one of our waivers, and y'all should be familiar with this, back in January 2020, they increased nursing rates by 10%, I think it was, and then another 5% in July, making a total of a 15% increase in private duty nursing pay rates, as well as a 5% increase in attendant care, and then adult day healthcare transportation also saw an increase. So anyways, HHS told us what money to ask for based on their historical results that they've had with utilization increases from rate increases like this. So they told us to ask for $17 million total, state and federal. We've actually looked at our current utilization. Now, granted, we have COVID going on right now, so we don't know how that impacts utilization, but we've only seen about a $4 million increase for this year that we're projecting. And so our concern is if we ask for 17, but we're only seeing 4, then we're not going to look right in front of the House asking for a bunch of money that we can't
Given
defend.
the
And
state of the
so,
economy right now, we just want to be as a matter of fact and transparent and truthful as possible, and we're just not seeing that utilization increase that was predicted. Not to say that it won't happen once COVID's gone, so we don't want to not ask for anything, but at the very least, got to cover the cost of the increase.
it's like nursing shortages right now in the state and nationally, really. How much will that improve once COVID is no longer, a risk? I think a lot of the utilization's suppressed because there's not enough nurses. You can create a rate and pay a rate, but if you can't find a nurse to provide the service, then, or maybe the family doesn't even want anybody in their home, because they're fearful of it. So what we're asking y'all have already approved the budget that we've submitted, the budget request, and what we're asking you to agree to is allow us just to revise the narrative. We're not going to change the amount we're asking for, but we're going to add some wording in the narrative to basically explain that we looked at utilization, and if they want to fund this, which we don't anticipate they will,
Right.
that we need to basically discuss more accurate figures at that time.
I'll tell you what I noticed this morning on CNN. They had, Berman, what's the lady name that comes on, 7 o'clock and 6 o'clock
Morning, in the morning?
in the morning? And there was a heated discussion. Could have been a debate with, the head of Pfizer, and it got really heated. Because the questions that were being asked, Pfizer couldn't answer. And at the end of that conversation, I gathered that we don't know where we are. So safe and sorry ran into my mind. Safe and what? Safe and not sorry. Safe and.
Better safe than sorry.
Better safe than sorry ran into my mind. Because we just don't know what is actually happening. And I would agree the rewrite, but I don't know whether I would change anything. I would just try to find those concrete things that will give us credibility. Just in case, I got an automobile outside, I got an emergency brakes on. I haven't used it since I had it, but it's there. Now, if it wasn't there, and I leave here now and I go get in it, and all of a sudden I mash my brake and it doesn't work. And I reach for the emergency brake and I say, oops, I forgot, I removed it. That would be my recommendation. What I would need to do is maybe, like you all were saying, just try to find more facts. Wouldn't change the number, and I wouldn't slight myself. Because this thing we don't know what we are dealing with.
So basically what we want to say is that we're just monitoring utilization
I ain't talking.
to make sure that we've got, make sure our numbers stay true.
Right.
Right now, we're not seeing that uptick, so if what you say, this thing stays out there, utilization is probably not gonna be zero.
Nobody can tell us when it's gonna end.
Mhm. I agree.
We even know when it does end, how many months or years it's gonna take to get back somewhat even close to what we used
We
to.
might be asking for another 17.
Yeah, so. All right, so do y'all have, well, I don't know, do you want a motion on that? I mean, it's really just adding verbiage.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we're gonna leave the numbers alone, so the numbers that you approved are already there. But I do want them to know that we're monitoring this utilization, because,
That's the key.
I just don't think throughout this next year that we're gonna hit those utilization marks. And I don't wanna say to them that we're taking money under false pretenses.
Right.
But I do want them to know that we're watching it, and if we see something start ticking down or ticking up, we will let them know.
Identifiers are
But this was the number that was given to us by HHS.
Yeah, identifiers are very good. I wouldn't change it enough.
I mean, maybe just bring it to the commission meeting.
We have to do this on the
It
19th.
has, well, it has to be.
We have to get it to them.
Tomorrow, on a one sheet. I guess we could change it if we wanted to change that. We can do that, but.
I think the commission meeting's after the 19th, isn't it?
I think it's the night, I think it's.
21st.
Yeah, we don't have time for the commission meeting if we're gonna change verbiage, but I don't know why we would need to go to the commission to change verbiage like that. I mean, I do think you need to change it though, because you don't want to look like a fool. So, I mean, or look unprofessional or whatever you want to call it. So I think you do need to change it so that we can be more clarifiable there. But I mean, as clarifiable as you can be, but I couldn't imagine the commission would be not in favor of that.
I agree.
We'll just say we're just monitoring,
Okay.
we're monitoring utilization, which we are.
Okay, all right.
Right.
All right.
Couple other things. If y'all remember, we're really trying to focus on training a lot in finance, and we had hired a lady out of North Carolina that did some training for us last year. We intend to retain her on an annual basis. One thing we're doing, the training was, I think, in April or May last year. And the issue is it was a 6-hour course and it really burnt people out. It was a lot for people to marinate on and to figure out and learn. So we're going to split it up into 3 2-hour sessions this go around. So we'll let the commission know in case they want to attend any of these, but she's doing basically accounting and auditing update for our providers. And so she'll be going over GASB, FASB, and audit standard type changes.
Chris, I just want to interrupt you for a second. I texted Stephanie and she says that her system went down so that we could call her to get back in. Yes. So I just want to do that.
Okay.
Kevin, that's right in line with where you are, what Chris just said.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, I agree with it. Adult day help still have nothing in my knowledge.
It's starting to, yeah,
A few.
Are there? Yeah.
but a lot of our families are not going back. Maybe because they're concerned about,
Hello?
Hey,
yeah.
Hey.
you're in the meeting now.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
All right.
Okay, are you hearing us now, Stephanie?
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing, but
That's because she was moving
Okay.
you should be able to hear us now.
Is this better?
yeah, much better.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So I was just updating everybody that we're going to have Melissa Galasso do 3 2-hour sessions. I'll invite the commission in case they want to attend, but it's our effort to educate our finance directors and help them understand their responsibilities and all the changes that are occurring in accounting standards that impact our providers, because these folks don't really have another source for this unless they go out and attend one of the South Carolina Association courses and so forth. And there's just a really cost-effective way to do this and really help our providers. And then we have basic finance training on the 10th of February. Again, this is the quarterly training that we do every quarter. And we do have, I think, 60 people again signed up for this thing. So even though it's the same topics quarter after quarter, we continue to get a very large
Yeah, things change.
well, it's the same training every single quarter.
People need to hear.
It's
this
word of
all the
mouth.
time, too.
Yeah, some of it's repetition. Some people are going to it because it's repetition. Others go to it because it's like, hey, I attended the basic training. I think even though you're my residential director, you should go to it, because they go over procurement and consumer funds and things that are, Andrew does a thing on maintenance.
Right.
So I think it's just spreading, throughout these
And we
organizations.
are seeing executive directors attend too, which is a
Right.
really good thing. That's our industry doesn't stand in departments. It doesn't stand in silos. Everybody's work touches everybody else. And so it is good that a residential director understands consumer funds. It's very good, actually, because they're the ones that are kind of in charge of it. The finance department just kind of oversees it, but The day-to-day is them.
So this would be a good training for commission members if they want to attend it. I know you were at one of them.
Yep.
I can't remember if anyone else has attended, but again, this is on the 10th. It's from 9 to 12, and I'll be glad to invite you all. And you can sit in if you want and learn some about DDSN basic finance stuff. And we talk IT and internal audit and procurement, and it's kind of a broad swath, if you will. And then one thing we need to add to this agenda next time is our next meeting. I just want to make sure that everybody's good for February 1st. It's going to be the first, literally. First Monday of February is the 1st.
Let me check.
So-
That's not my birthday.
So just want to make sure, that everybody has that on their calendars. And I think we need to add that like we do on the commission. So it's right here since we got them standardized now.
Yep.
And that was all I had.
All right. Anyone that doesn't have any questions, or Chris, then we'll move on to item 13. The internal audit report from Kevin.
All right, just sort of let you know where we are, as I mentioned during the commission meeting last time. We just completed an audit of the process here at DDSN to include P cards. We're set to have a corrective action plan on that on January the 11th. So once we get that, we'll review it and we will get that out to you as quickly as possible. I'm not sure if it'll be before the next commission, but we'll push for that. But you'll be getting it this month. We also, coming back from the holidays, we're starting a review of interpreter services. We're looking at that. That's where we're using interpreter services for eligibility for autism, and where some of the EI providers are using interpreter services when they're going in to provide their service. We had started, I was hoping to finish it before the close of the calendar year, but the auditor that's doing reviews of ROAPs had started a client banking system review. We'll get that out. He's still reviewing those, but we'll do some reassignment or something. We'll pick that back up this year and get that exit with Chris and his folks, and then get that issued. And that's really it. Just sort of giving you an update on where we are. Any questions?
So the interpreter services, so you're doing an audit on that? So explain that a little bit. Like, is it just seeing how many providers are out there?
Really looking at costs of it, because it's all state dollars.
Okay.
Um,
So evaluating fees, exchanging hands for these services.
Where is it being utilized? What providers? Are there any outliers where it's really, really excessive? Are there a handful of providers that are, using 80% of the money? Just really an analysis of it. See. And again, see if there's any recommendations, because it's all state dollars. Is there something else that we can look at, or do we need to, and I have no idea because we haven't started the field work, but is there something that maybe we need to, it's being used excessively and we need to put limits on?
When's the last time you think that was?
I don't know that it's ever been looked at.
Is there any way to, is it going to be any way to verify that the services were actually provided to the person? Can we ask them? And is there any way we can not inadvertently, but spot checkingly ask and make sure that the services were provided?
I would think that'd be part of the audit.
Yeah, it will be, and looking at the documentation and, on those, like the EI has to sign off that the interpreter was in fact present during the meeting. That's part of the invoicing process. But yeah, we can also reach out to families and, make sure that they're receiving the service. I think it's going to be an interesting audit, to tell you the truth.
Do we have a fee schedule for this? Do we know, do we have the same fee that goes out for every hour of interpreter service everywhere across the state, or is that?
I think it's a flat fee based on I think maybe it's a 15-minute unit.
I think it varies some on,
But it does vary.
some variation on.
It does vary telephonetic, if it's telephone or face-to-face, there is.
And I thought there was something having to do with age too. I don't remember. I was helping Brooke with that before COVID hit.
Well, I think
They
that
were like-
when it all comes down to it, I think that, or at least I'm hoping that we see that probably clarifying our process for this would be, a good starting point for some of the stuff. I think that's a lot of things that we're seeing. Our process is kind of muddy.
I will tell you, we do have some preliminary data, and like, there are a couple outliers. There are a couple of providers that
Yeah.
use it a lot, and some providers that, and I haven't again tested this, but I'm just sort of a quick scan test. I'm like, I don't even see such and such a provider. I don't even see. So it'll be interesting.
I mean, there will be pockets of parts of the state.
Absolutely.
Higher,
Absolutely.
you know,
There could be, and that could be it.
population and the need is, greater.
Right.
or different. Is it, how many languages is it that we offer? I mean, I know it's gotta be more than just Spanish, right?
Well, again, we hadn't even delved that far into it, but, we contract with an interpreter service. So a lot of it could be the interpreter services, how many languages do they offer? I know there are some agencies that use, I think it's called Language Line. Now it's all telephonetically, but if you have somebody that speaks
Mandarin.
right, a very unusual dialect for this area, they can go through the language line and use an interpreter. So I don't know if there are any providers that that our providers would contract with that would have that service available to them or specialize in a certain number of languages.
All right, thanks for that. Anyone have any questions, for Kevin on any of those things? You reported on? All right, so the final item, on our agenda is, executive session. I'd like to see if someone can make a motion to enter into executive session.
So moved.
Get a second? Can I get a second?
Sorry, second. I thought I was on, I was off.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So now we're going to.
Need to make sure you
Okay, so we, returned from executive session, and, Commissioner, Malfris, made a motion to adjourn the executive session, and, Ed, Miller, seconded. So just make sure the minutes reflect that. No, decisions were made, during executive session, and we'll, discuss the information, at a later date. Can I get a motion to adjourn our Finance and Audit Committee meeting?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second. Needs to be there on the record. Motion by Ed, seconded by Mary, yes.
Right, okay. So all in favor say aye.
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 All right, we are adjourned. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Stand adjourned at
y'all have a nice evening.
5:25 p.m. So thank you.
5:23.
5:23, okay. Thank you.
Damn trash.